Hello and welcome to IMDB Data Read Part 4. In this video we'll be talking about databases. More precisely, we'll be downloading all the data from IMDB as we did before, but in this case we'll be storing all this data in our database to later be able to reuse multiple times as we start our application from new, so we don't need to download from IMDB each time. To work today we'll need two external applications. One of them is XAMPP, that we'll be using as database server, and other one is Heidi SQL that we'll be using as a database client to go through and look at the database visually. If you have any kind of alternatives for both of these applications, you can surely use any of them, but I will be using these ones. And if you don't have them, you can just go ahead and download them. Just Google both of these programs and there should be no problems downloading them. So when you install, it's also really straightforward. Couple next buttons and everything will be ready. And once you open them for the first time, this is how the XAMPP control panel looks like, and this is Heidi SQL next to it. So to start our database server, you can simply click on the start in the MySQL line, and once it's green, you can know that the database server is started. Couple of things: XAMPP's default username for database server is root, and the password is empty, not the actual word empty, but the empty string, and the port is 3306, as we can see here. All of these settings you can change into the configuration, but we're not going to do so just for the simplicity of this video. And once we have our database started, we can open Heidi SQL and create a local session that will connect to this database server, and we'll be able to create new databases in there. So these are all default settings that I have here. This is the first time opening fresh Heidi. By the way, it is named after Heidi Klum. There's a German guy who created this software, and he admitted that he named it after Heidi Klum. Oh well. All of these network type through TCP/IP, we'll be using that. We'll have the default library. The host name is localhost 127.001. This means localhost, and username will be root, as I said before. Password is empty, and port is 3306 or any other if you're using something else. In this line, you can set databases you want to open with this session. As I don't have any databases and I don't want to specify anything yet, I will leave this empty. I will save this session. The star disappears from here, so you can know that this session is saved. And now you can simply open it. And here you have our local database server with a couple of default databases. We actually don't need them. So the first thing I like to do always is right-click on the server, create new database. We can call it IMDB. And we've created a new database. I can now go to Session Manager, change this session, and specify the database I want to use. I want just the IMDB. If I want multiple databases, I can separate them by semicolon and maybe say test and MySQL or something. But for now, we just need IMDB. We can again save this, open it up again, disconnect from the previous one, and now we have our local database only with the database that we need. This is database server, right? And this is the actual database. So to start working here, we need to just create a new database table. What I like to do is start all the table names with the prefix table, TBL, underscore, and then I can write actors. But you can definitely name all these tables the way you want. Here you can set some comment. You write something. Hey, this is IMDB's actors. Actually, we're not going to use actors, but movies, of course. For now, we'll just create a couple of examples, and once we get to understand how it all works, we can move on to create actually the full database, full structure, as we'll need later on. So for now, just for example, I'll create an ID. This will be integer. We will not allow null, and the default value will be auto increment, right? This means we're going from 1 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the database generates this ID automatically. This can be unsigned integer, which means there's no plus or minus sign. can short those, add another, maybe movie has a title. The data type will be varchar, which means like a string in Java. I think 50 length is good enough. The default value we can set to empty string. We can also set it to null, but I like to have the empty string so we don't have problems in Java later on. Maybe description, which is also varchar, and this might be, I don't know, I think 1,000 characters might be enough, but I don't know. Okay, maybe 5,000. This will also by default be empty, of course, and if we have the auto increment ID, we want to create new index and set it as a primary key. And one thing I want to add as well would be rating. We'll have it as a decimal. Let's have the maybe 3 and 1 behind point, like 10.7 or 3.8. Or although, was it? I think, yeah, it was with commas. Okay, so default will be 0. We have it. Let's move the rating down and save. And there we go. We have our first database table set up. Really easy, nothing too hard, right? And then we can move to our data tab, which shows the data that is in this database table that we have selected. And here, as we can see, there's no data at the beginning, so we can right click and just insert some rows. Title will be, well, let's say Titanic. I have no idea why I use Titanic every time as an example. That is not my favorite movie. Description, that another teen movie. And rating will be, well, 6.6. And if we click somewhere outside of this row, it saves it, it generates the ID, and everything's fine. We can maybe insert another row, maybe Bad Boys for Life, maybe 8. Then we can also duplicate row with keys and without keys. I want to duplicate it without keys, so it generates the ID by itself. I don't want the ID being 2, so there will be problems with that for Life. Again, right, this is basic database stuff. I'm not going too deep into this to explain any of that. Maybe something else, I don't know, fun stuff. That movie. And 4.8, right? Okay, here we go. And we can also open the query tab and write actual queries, like select all from table movies, maybe where rating is larger than 5. We can run this query and we can get the result right in here. But as I don't want to write all the queries all the time to see some data, we can go back to data tab and click on the filter. And right here we can write maybe rating is larger than 5, apply filter, and we can see the same stuff right here. We don't need to rewrite anything. It's just right here we can see everything that we want. Right, so this is very convenient. I use it all the time. Also, we can use some recent filters from this tab, so it's all really nice and neat. Okay, so we have our database set up. We can clear the filter. We have it all set up. What we can do right now is go into the Eclipse and create some example project to see how we can retrieve the data from the database. Right, let's create a example Java project. Let's call it database example. Finish and don't create. And right in here we can create new classes. One will be main, for example, with the main method, and another one will be for the database. I'll call it DB as short for database. So before we start working with anything, we need to import the library that helps us work with MySQL. We can select our project, go to project properties as usual, build path, class path, add external jars, and this is MySQL connector This is also a thing you can download from the web easily. I'll also leave a link in the description where you can download it. Usually it comes into a zip file or tar file. You can extract it and just take the connector Java file, jar file, and I have 5.1.48. This is the latest I could find. So there shouldn't be any problems downloading it. And I'll just choose this one, apply, and well, the stuff is done. In here, I can just create a new database object. Nothing set to it, right? And here we can actually work with the database object. And what we have to do at the beginning is set up the, well, number one would be actually the constructor. When we create a new object, we can also set it to public, but it doesn't matter. And we'll have a couple of elements that we need to work with this database. All of them are going to be private, just for security. One will be connection. We'll also have a statement. Also a result set. And we can Control-Shift-O and import all of them. They will be taken from Java SQL statement, SQL connection, and result set is also from that library, from that package, right? And in the constructor, we are wrapping everything in try-catch block. And say in the catch block, maybe problems creating database connection, and maybe print the error as well, or maybe print stack trace so we can see all the error right here. So what we have to do is just set up the basic data. One is connection. We use a driver manager to get a connection, and here we can use this method. We have to create a URL, what we are connecting to, and a username and password that we have to use. So this URL is, well, maybe not so straightforward. We are using GDBC with MySQL database. The link to it is localhost. We can also use this 127.001. I'll just use localhost for now. The port is 3306 and /IMDB, which is the database that we're actually using, right? And then the username is root that we used as we connected via Heidi SQL, and the password is empty for now. So we just have it all. These are the connection settings that we need to connect to our database. And then this statement is connection, and we create statement. And these are just the starting things that you need to start working with databases, so you can create select statements. We're just opening a connection to the database, and at the end of our work, our application will just close it at the end down, right? So this is just a preparement, the start work that you have to have. And you don't have to worry about remembering any of this. What I do is when I work with databases, I either go into one of my old projects and copy everything, copy these starting methods, or I just go into the Google, create MySQL connection and copy a method from there. So I never remember any of these, but well, I had to for this video, right? So this is totally not a thing you have to remember. So don't worry about that. Let's create a couple of methods. One will be void select. We'll just go through how these things work, and one will be insert. So database has four main principles, four main elements that it can have. This is called the CRUD principle. So it means create, read, update, and delete. So we can create new records in the database, we can retrieve them back, we can change them, or we can delete them if we don't want them later on. For this project, though, we will be using only the first two. We'll be creating new records in the database, and then we'll retrieve them back or select them to use. We're not going to update them, and we definitely don't want to delete any movies. But maybe you will later on. You can use that. But for now, we'll just be focusing on select and insert statements. So in here, we can also wrap this up into the try catch. Okay, maybe say problems with select, and so on. So what we have to do is create a query, what we want to get from this database, and let's say select all from table actors. Nothing too specific right now. Wait, it was movies. Was it movies? Yeah, it was movies. Okay, cool. So this is the basic query. And then we can take this result set, and the result set is where all the records that we retrieve from the database is put in. It's like a two-dimensional array, right? As we can see here, each row is a different record from the database, and each column is a different column from the database. So it should be pretty straightforward to understand how it works. And then for the statement, we call execute query. As we can see, the first method here, and we have to pass the SQL query, which is this string. And to go through this result set, we just have to create a while loop and say result set, just take the next element, and if we have it, we can work with it. So on each row, when we go to work with this RS, with this result set element, we'll be working with each different row, like we're using just simple loops. So to show that, I can maybe create ID. And the question is, how can we get these specific columns from the database, right, from this row? Well, there are two options. First of all, there are multiple options how we can get an element from this row. As we press the dot, we can write get, and you can maybe see the possible options. We can get int, get byte, get short, get string as well, get double, get date, and all the possible data types, right? So if you want an ID, which is an integer, you can write get int. And in here, you also have two options. One is to call by the column index. One is by the column name. But if you're calling by the column index, you have to remember that the first column index is 1, as it's written right here. It doesn't start with the 0, right? It starts with 1. So here it would be ID is the first, second, third, and fourth. As we want a specific elements from specific database rows and columns, we want to specify the name of the column, not the number of it, right? So I'm writing ID, which I want. In here, it would work with the first column as well, but I want to make sure we're using ID. And then string title is rs, get string. It also should be pretty straightforward. Title, right? And then string description is rs, get string, and description. One thing why I wouldn't suggest using the numbers is, let's say you have 20 columns for the movie, or however how many we have, like something like 15, let's say, and you're calling everything by first column, second column, third, and so on. What if you decide to create another column in here and put it after ID, right? So you will have 16 columns, but then all of these names would have to go down. What was second before would be third right now, and you have to change the code in all the places that you use it. But if we are calling each column by its name, so it doesn't matter what you add to the table row, title will always be title and description will always be description. Here we are just printing the basic results. We can go back to the main, and for this database object, we can call this select method. And so in the constructor, if we go to that, it connects to the database. It has this connection and statement ready to work. And once we call the select, we're saying, okay, statement, execute this query that I want. It executes the query, gets all the data back from the database, and puts it in the results set. After that, we're looping through each row and getting each column that we need and printing them out. Yeah, maybe ID is what I didn't add, but whatever. Then we can run this as an application and see right here that we have all these values that we created before. And we can add here any kind of MySQL query that we want, maybe where something, or maybe limit to 3. Maybe we can order the elements, whatever we want, right? So this is 3. We can use all the like queries and everything. There are no limitations to this. Okay, so we have this. Now we can create an insert query. It's not too different from the select query. The basic idea works the same way. We have our query, string query equals something. And then what we do, we say, okay, statement, execute, and not query, but execute update. And this we will be using for both insert and update queries. And in here, we don't need to put the result into the result set because insert and update queries do not have any results. We don't need to get anything back. We just want to stuff everything into the database. So what we can do is just to create a insert into table movies. The columns will be, we're not going to set the ID, it will be created automatically by the database. So title, description, and rating. Then we say values, and we say, well, that movie, that cool movie, and rating will be, well, 9.2. And then we execute the query, and everything's fine. So what we can do is actually create the DB insert, and after that we select all the elements from the database. So if we run it, we can see we had those before. We created a new one. If we go back to here and refresh it, we see that we create a new movie in here. Everything's fine. So there's another option how we can create elements into the database. This is, we can call it a single insert. And the other option is bulk insert, right? If we read the IMDB page, for one page we have 50 movies. We don't want to create 50 separate insert queries because it would be like the same way we are going to the store, buying an apple, coming home, putting it down, going back to the store, buying an apple again, and coming down, as we just repeating the same thing until we have all the apples that we need. And it's not the best way to work. Yes, we are having this database connection open, so it's not like totally starting everything over, but still, if we can put everything into one query, it's a lot better. So the simple thing we can do is, let's create a loop. Let's say int I is, well, let's start from 3, go up to where I is less than 30, and I++. And then what we're going to do is add to the query these values. And in here, to make them a bit different, let's say we add the I element. So just we have some number to it. The I, and the rating will be, let's say, I divided by 5. Okay, so the rating is a bit different for all of them. So we're just, oh, and we need a comma at the end. So we have values of these, then comma values of something else and something else. Before we print it, before we execute it, we can print the query so we see what we are adding. But one thing that we have is if we are, let's say, creating 30 something, whatever extra rows of values, we will still be having this comma at the end of the query. What we can do is go query equals query substring from the start up until query length -1. So we're cutting this string off before the last element. So we are cutting off this last comma that we don't need. Okay, and then we can try to execute it. We see that we have a lot of movies. We can take this query. We can refresh this one and we can see we created a lot of movies. And then in here we can, just to see how it works, we have lots of rows for values. So this is how we can insert multiple movies with one query. Okay. But there's one thing that we would like to have is have something unique for each movie so we can be sure that, so we can differentiate movies from each other. And what we want to do with this unique element is make sure in the database that we do not create multiple duplicates of this movie. So let's say the title of the movie is this unique element. We can right click, create new index and add it unique, right? So each movie title will have to be unique. And if we click save, everything's fine. So right now, if we try to insert all of these movies again, what we're going to have is SQL error saying there's a duplicate entry for key title, right? So in the database, we have made a security patch that we cannot create multiple duplicate movies. So maybe we have read all this database once, all this IMDB, let's say 100 pages once, and then we want to read it again and store all the movies that we don't have, store them in our database. And to make sure we do not create duplicates every time we read it again, we can just say, okay, we have the title to be unique and just don't insert if this movie title already exists. But there's a problem. If we try to create, let's say how many we have, like 27, 28 movies here. If one of them has this ID or has this title that is not unique, all of this query will stop and none of the movies will be inserted, right? So what we can do is to prevent all this query, all these movies to not being inserted, we can say insert ignore into the movies. And with this ignore keyword, what we will have is, let's say we have 100 or 50 movies in the page. 3 movies we already have in our database. If we would try to insert all of these movies with one query, it would stop, it would cause an exception, and nothing would execute and no new movies would be added. If we are calling this insert ignore, this database query would ignore all these movies that it has already and just insert all of these that do not have any exceptions on them. And then here we can see, yes, we are producing warnings, but that is fine. Yeah, whatever, we can say yes. Oh, we actually don't need it. It just shows the warnings. But if we call it from Java, it will not cause an exception. There will be no problems with this. So if we create this one right now, if we go back to this data, we have these movies in our database table. If we try to call this insert again, let's see what happens. We have an exception that there's a duplicate entry for the first movie that we try to insert. And nothing is happening, right? If we try to go from 30 to 46, or let's say to 50, if we try to insert all of them, there's an exception, and we can see that no new movies were added from 30 up. But if we are saying, okay, insert ignore into table movies, then we run again. There's some kind of a problem. Oh, I don't know how to write the word ignore. Yeah, ignore into table movies. There we go. And we write it again. And there we can see we created these movies and no exceptions were made. No, there was no exception and nothing broke from Java point of view. Now we can see that all these movies are created and no duplicates were made in there as well. So everything's fine in here. So when we want to create new movies, we can use this ignore keyword, so we don't have to worry about duplicates or anything. Okay, before we move on to working with these movies from IMDB database, I want to paint a picture for what is going to happen, like what's the big picture, right? So number one, we have this, where is it? The IMDB website, where we have all these movies. Number two, we have our Java application that we had created in two parts. The one was, we can call it objects. We just downloaded everything from IMDB and created new Java objects. And the second part was JFrame application, where we actually showed everything visually, right? The JFrame. What we initially had was, there was a list of movies in IMDB. We were downloading everything. We were actually using a JSoup library to help us work with these HTML objects. We downloaded everything, created new objects in our Java application, right? And after that, once we created all the objects, we created a new JFrame to show everything into the list of elements. That was how we worked. And once we started everything again, we actually the first we call the requests to this web page, get back the results, create objects, and then create JFrame. What we want to do right now is, okay, let's leave it as it is. We want to start with the same thing. Where's my mouse? Okay. We want to start with the same thing. We're asking IMDB, we're getting the data, we're taking them back to our Java application. Yes, we are creating objects, but after this, we are not creating JFrame right away. Instead, we are adding our extra new layer, that is our MySQL database. And we will take those objects and store them in our database. Right, so then we have our new values stored in here. And then once we have elements in our database, we can take them and put them into the JFrame. And what this actually does, what's the whole point of all of this, is that all of this is our local machine. Which means once we read everything from the IMDB site, we do not need this site at all anymore. We can just run around with our own circles, with our own local database, with our own Java objects. We do not care how many objects we read. We can work with it, filter it, reopen it 100 times, and we will not be bothering imdb.com with our requests. And in here we will also have just as a helper tool, we will have the Heidi database client, Heidi SQL, that will simply have a look into the database, and we can just simply, once we create something in the database, we can go into the Heidi, as you saw, we can just look at it, maybe edit something, delete or work with it, and then just go back to the working with the Java, and it works with the database as well. It's like a portal between database and this visual environment that we have. So the first thing we want to do is stop this from happening. After objects, we do not want to create JFrame right away, and then we will work on creating our MySQL database and putting all the data in it. Okay, so we can actually go ahead and do that right at the beginning in the Movie Maker class. If we go back to the main of our project, we see that we are calling Movie Maker constructor. And in here we have this reading method that we created. This we can remove. This we can also remove. Then we see we read all the pages, and after that we are creating a movie list frame, which if we open is a JFrame, right? So we do not need any of that. We can just comment it out and we'll have only the reading of the IMDB pages right now. We'll just leave it at 1 for the beginning for the testing, because we will be needing to run it just a couple of times until we can actually run and save everything in our database. But there's another little problem that we have to face. Before, for this example, I created a title as a unique element for the movie. But I find it problematic because we can have multiple movies with the same title. Maybe there's, I don't know, Star Wars 1 and Star Wars 2, they will have a separate titles because there would be, this number would be different. But there might be, and I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of movies that are completely different but have the same title. It would be really great if we could find something from this web page that we can use as a unique element. So once we are getting the element from this IMDB page, before we are actually going to put it in our database, we want to know if we have it or not, right? If we have it in our database already. Let's say we get a movie called, I don't know, Bad Boys, and we see that there is a movie called Bad Boys in our database. There's no way knowing that this movie that we just got is the same Bad Boys movie that's in the database. Yes, the description can be the same. Yes, the actors can be the same. Even the rating can be the same. But it doesn't matter that the movie is the same. So what I would like to do is go to IMDb site and look for something that each of this movie has that is unique to each one of them. And we can just open 2 movies, or let's say 3 movies. And as we can see, all of these movies have the same kind of visual. It's like the same page, it only has a different data in it. It's the same type of page. And usually with these types of situations, when we are opening pages, it has something specific to each one of those pages. And as we can see in the URL, the page is called imdb.com/title and then something. And this we actually don't need. It's like reference tab something. And this is this unique element that each of this movie has. It's like its unique ID that IMDb uses to differentiate any movies between 2 of them. And if we are opening, let's say open 2 actors, and we are opening them by name, and this is Tom Holland's unique identifier, this is Chris Pratt's unique identifier, so we can actually add this one to our database. So then we can use these ones as unique elements, so we can differentiate all of them between each other. So to do so, we just need to add these elements from these links. And if we right click and inspect the element, we can see that in the title we have this A tag and it has this link, and in the link we can take out this, between these slashes we can take out its ID. Maybe we can just Control F this element. Oh, there's actually in this ribbon, it has data constant as well. And then it's in the link, in multiple links. User rating value also has it, but I think there were some movies that didn't have it. I don't remember. Starbars widget also has the ID that we can strip this name out of. There's a weird ID of this one. We can also strip it out of. We can use multiple elements of this, but these are these unique elements that we can have, that we can read this ID from. What I would like to do is use this, which one is it? From the title of the movie, because if we go back to the, where was it? To the movie maker, we can see that we already have this URL for the movie, right? We created it. Actually, I've just run past you and created this ID, forgot to delete it. And so we can just take this URL from the movie, which is this thing, and we can split it by the title, then take the first part and split it before the next slash. And if we take it and strip it apart, so we have this, it will actually have HTTP, the full imdb.com, right? Even if it has it, we are splitting this URL by the title and the slash, so which means we are splitting it by this. From this call, we are getting array with 2 elements, right? What is before this title, what is after this title. Then we are taking the first part of this array, so the 0 is no more, we have only this one. Then from this, the first element, we are splitting it by the slash. So this is the only slash that's left. So after this, we're getting array with 2 elements. And from this, we are getting the 0th element. So this is the ID that we wanted. This is a common practice just to strip out something in between 2 elements, between title and the slash and the next slash. This is what we can use. So we are getting this IMDB ID, right? So this is what we have. What we can do is add this IMDB ID to this IMDB ID to this movie constructor. Go to movie constructor and add a, what was it, string IMDB ID. We can also add a new element, which we'll use it as a string because it has 2 letters on it. I'm not too sure that all the movies have TT in front of them. I think it means like title, that's why it's TT, but I'm not so sure. I'm going to leave both of these symbols in front as well. So it doesn't change anything for us, right? So this will be IMDB ID for the movie. Then after title, we'll say this IMDB ID will be IMDB ID. Okay, then we have it and everything's fine. The same we have to do for the actors as well. We open the link, we can see that his link has the ID between name slash and the next slash. This one has NM, I think it means name. So we go back to the movie maker, and here we have actor URL. We can create string IMDB ID again, actor URL, split by the, what was it, name and slash, take the first part, then split that by a slash again, and take the 0th part from that. Oh, it's a, here we are using this variable IMDB ID. That's why in here it says we are recreating it again. We cannot do that, so we can say maybe actor IMDB ID, because this element's variable scope is in all of this method, also within those 4 loops. So we can have this, and when we are adding actor, we can just add his ID, and let's say IMDB ID, and here it just takes it from the constructor. Okay, we have that. And the question is what we are going to do with genres, because they do not have any links to them. We cannot get any unique ID from them. Well, the good situation is we do not have to do anything about it, because if we are opening, I think there was we could, yes, if we are opening the comedy, we can see actually in here as well, the genre's name actually is this unique identifier. There will not be two genres with the same name comedy, right? So its name is actually its unique identifier, its unique feature. So for the actor, the unique element will be his ID that starts with NM. For the movie, it will be the element that starts with TT. Again, this IMDB ID. And for the genre, its title will be its unique element. So we do not need any extra elements from that. So if we have comedy already, we will not be creating any new genre that will be named comedy. So that's that. Okay, then we cut off the JFrame part. What we have to do is right now start to work with this database table for movies. And to do so, we just need to create what we need in actual database. So in here, we can also write query that where we delete all these elements from the database, we can right click and say empty table. We can go and Control A and also delete selected rows. In Heidi, there are so many ways how you can empty a database table with a couple of clicks. So we know that this database table is empty. Now we can go back to, what do we need? We need our Eclipse movie, so we can see what kind of elements this movie has. So actors and genres will be in different database tables. We'll just create all of these ones. Maybe I'll get bored and just create first 4, but well, let's see. Okay, we have this, and then we have this one. We can create it a little bit smaller so we can see all of these elements. So we have ID. Okay, how can we remove indexes? Title, remove. Okay, easy to understand. Okay, title will not be unique one. There's a description. We have to add IMDB ID, which will be varchar. Let's leave it at 50. Unsigned. There will be no default value to it because we will need a specific ID for each one of the elements. And for this one, we'll say it's a unique. Then description, and after all of this, just everything as it is. Image URL, which is a varchar. I don't know, 500, because these variable names were pretty long. The custom text will be empty string. Image URL, then is TV show. Is TV show. And for the database, we are not having a true or false element, the Boolean element, but we are having an integer, which is tiny int, just like a smaller integer with a smaller range of values. We're just having it as 1 is true and 0 is false. And it's a TV show, we can default have it as a 0. It will not be a TV show by default. Add a new one, year, which is what? Year is a double. Is it a double? Why is year a double? Why isn't year an integer? Interesting. Okay, let's leave it a double, whatever. Although it's weird, and we shouldn't have it as double, but maybe there was an idea behind it. Yeah, let's have the 0 as a default, and year, let's leave it as double. Let's have it as and 0 will be the default value. What do we have? Certificate. What was it? Oh, this was like R-rated or TB14 or something. So that was some kind of a string. It was something. Right? So by the default, it will be empty. We can try to save it to see if we don't have any errors. Okay, we can move on by adding a new one, the length. The length was in minutes, so we can say integer. Default is 0, it's fine. And a new one, and rating we have already. So Metascore. Okay, I think this is it. We have created all the columns. This one we don't have, don't need, and we can save it. This one we can name as everything else, local image, and we can maybe put this one next to the image. Although it doesn't matter at all, you can save it and see at the data, everything is fine. We have created all these columns in the database. And yeah, I think it's fine. But there's one extra thing. What if we have everything set up like this and we want to run this program in another, let's say on another computer where all of these databases are not created, all these database tables, right? So the best thing would be to see at the beginning in our Java program, we can open it up and see, okay, if the database table is not created, let's create it, right? We don't want to redo all of this every time we want to run our application on another database. So we would have to do all this within a database query. Go to, let's say, yeah, if we go into the constructor, we could say create movie table and then pass the all this long query that's create table, do everything. We have to set everything that we set in here, do everything like that in our query, and it will be pretty long and we have to spend a lot of time to do that. But in HeidiSQL, we can just steal our create code, which means this is an SQL that we need to create this database table. We can just take all of this, the semicolon at the end as well, and we can just copy it and use it in our application. But one thing we have to understand is if we run it, there's an error again that the table movies already exists. And what we have to do is, if we go with ignore table, it's not going to work like that. So here we have a little bit different keywords. If not exists table, and then we run it. Or I put it in the wrong place, obviously. Create table if not exists. And now we have the warning just before, as with the ignore in the insert statement. we have a warning, but it still creates or doesn't create the table, but there's no problem from Java point of view. So right now we can copy this. I'll actually go to Sublime and use multi-cursor to put it in one row. If you don't know how to do that, you can just do everything manually. So right now we can actually step away from our database example. Where was this main method for this one? I think we had it open. We have to close it. And then we can go back to our project and create a new class called database. Let's actually post it in here just to save it, because we want to go back to this one and copy this constructor and all of this in here from there. So we have all this. And then after we create our initial connections, we want to create tables. Okay. We'll just run this these queries for each of the database tables, just if they are not created before. Public void create tables. We could do all of this a lot more dynamically, right? Somewhere in configuration or something, we could say how long are the elements, what's the data type, and so on. But for the simplicity of this video, we will be using just this simple long query. And we'll be saying, we will have also an insert query, just as we had here. But instead of calling a static query and running some loops, we will be passing this insert query. It will be just a query that we have to run without worrying about what it returns back to us. Right, so we don't have any of this. We have this insert query, we just execute it and forget about it. And problems with query and the one that was passed. And right here, after this query, we can just call insert, or maybe this insert, and the query that we have right here. Okay, so each time we initialize database tables, we'll try to create tables. If they didn't exist, it would create them. If they didn't exist, it would just skip the move altogether for each of the table. Right? We can actually write it for, okay, that was for movies, for actors, and for genres as well, but we'll do that a little bit later. Okay, we have all this. We have our database table. We have it empty, right? Refresh, cool. So what do we need to do right now is try to insert these movies that we read from the web, try to insert them into our database. And the question is how we're going to do that and at which moment we're going to do that. If we are opening back our beautiful drawing, that there is an option we can, as we remember, we are reading one page, page by page. In one page, we have 50 elements, I think, and we are looping through each one of them and creating a new object on each iteration. We can try to add the object to the database just as it is created. So in one page, we'll create insert query 50 times. Or what we could also do is try a bulk insert. When we read a page, get 50 elements from the page and try to insert all the 50 of them into the database table. That will create one query and there will be no problems, hopefully, with it. So what we have to do is, in here we have read page. Where is it? Read page. So then we are reading movie block. what we want to do is create a string where we would just generate this big insert query for all of these database columns for each of this movie. Right, so let me find the correct place. We are reading movie block. And then we are adding movie to the movies list. So the problem is we have this movie list that we are generating, and if we will take all of this list each time and try to add them to the database, then it will have 50 movies at the first page, but once we are reading the second page after it, we will have 100 movies. So we will be trying to insert 100 movies in it. And at the third page, we'll take all of this list and we'll be trying to have 150 movies inserted, right? So we'll be doing a lot of work unnecessarily. So we have to create another list that is only for this one page for only these 50 movies. So what we can do is create another list, or actually we could use this movie list right now because we will not be using movies from this list anyway. We'll be just reading them and reading all of this from the IMDB, writing everything in the database, and then closing the program. And next time when we want to show it visually, we'll be opening it up again and not reading from the web, but populating these lists from the database. So we do not need to have all the movies in this array list at all. So what we can do after reading all the pages, after reading one page, we can say populate, or maybe save into save movies from page maybe. And what we can do is pass this movies list. And after we do that, we can say this movies list clear. So we are emptying this list because we don't need these movies anymore. We read the page, we can delete them and read the next page again because we are saving these elements in our database. We don't need them all in our list. We don't care if this list at the end is 1,000 movies full or it has only the last page. We'll be closing the program anyway. So in this movie maker, what we can actually do is create a database object. And once we create it, okay, this is that. This database is new database. Creating new object and calling this save movies from page for this database. We're calling this for the database object and passing the array list of all the movies that we want to create. From here, we can close the example and go to our database and create a new method, void save movies from page. And what we are given is array list of movie elements. It's movies. Insert array list, Control-Shift-O, and there we go. What we have to do is, as we did before, maybe we should have left it open, we need to create the head, the main part of this query, and then loop through all of these movies and add the stuff for each of the rows. Right, so let's create a string query equals insert, of course, into the string, insert ignore into table movies. And then we can see in here, we just add the list of all the elements that we want to add, right? So we say, then there will be values. But in here, we have to copy all of these elements that we had before. So we are adding everything except the ID element. So we can actually make this one smaller and say I will actually create a new string. Columns is title, IMDB ID, description, and so on. I think this is it. And the thing that we are doing right now is actually done by the libraries like Hibernate, for example, in Java, or Laravel has Eloquent, I think. Eloquent. So these are the helper libraries that make us we can create all of these database classes, and we can just call the method save, for example, and we do not need to create specifically these insert statements and write everything by ourselves. But to understand the basics, we have to create it, and we have to dig deep into how it's all created. Right? So we have all these columns. We can loop through all of these elements. The movies. And now what we have to do is string part is something, and then we can say query add this part. And what this part will have is the title in the single quotes, right? Then we have the movie.title. After that, in the single quotes, because IMDB ID is the string, we have to take the same order as we set for these elements. So the title is first, IMDB ID is second, and so on. So the rating is a number. That's why we do not need to add parentheses, because it's not like a string. Movie rating. Yes, and then is TV show is also a number. And that will be movie is TV show. We can say if it's true, then we are having 1. If it's not, then we're having a 0. Although if we are inserting with true or false, I think it works too. I haven't actually done it for a long time manually like this. So you might try to insert into this 1 and 0 element, trying to insert actually the word true and false. So if it's TV show, it's 1. If it's not, then it's 0. After TV show, we have a year. That was a number. So after the end here, we have a comma, space, and then certificate. And cert was, I think it was a string, so we have a movie.certificate. Then after that, we have a length, which is a number. And if you haven't done any of this before, you will probably make a lot of mistakes creating this query. I'm not sure. I'm not going to create mistakes by missing some of these quotes. So what you want to do when you try to insert it, you will definitely want to print the query as well. So if you have an exception, then you can just look at the insert query and visually see what's the problem. And then we have movies metascore. And the votes is also a number. I hope it works. I don't want to go through with this multiple times. The gross is a number, so movies gross. Oh no, movie.gross, of course. Then the director, that's a string, so we have to wrap it in single quotes. Director. Image URL is also a string. And local image as well. And then we need to have these as within the parentheses. At the end, we close it with parentheses and add the comma at the end. And after we've done all of these, we can say query equals query substring, just we did before from the start, to the query length -1. And then we can call this insert our query. Save movies from